Deep inside a mountain, a stone wall displays a painting of a creature that supposedly died out millions of years ago. These ancient galleries act as the first record of the human experience, but many of them contain images that defy every law of history and biology. You are about to discover 25 mysterious cave paintings that depict impossible scenes, revealing a version of the past that our modern textbooks claim is impossible. By the end of this journey, you will possess a new understanding of how our ancestors might have witnessed advanced technology and lost species long before the dawn of civilization. How could a hunter living 10,000 years ago accurately draw the internal gears of a machine? Why do multiple cultures across the globe share identical portraits of beings that look like they arrived from the stars? This walk through the dark corners of the earth shows that the origins of our world are far more complex and bizarre than we ever dared to believe. What would it change for you if we found out the past was much more advanced than we were taught? High atop a desolate plateau in the Algerian Sahara, thousands of intricate illustrations transform the rock face into a silent gallery of the impossible. These are the Skyway hunters of Tassili and n-Ajjer, where ancient artists captured figures that seem to defy the very pull of the earth. These figures are seen hovering in the air without the aid of wings or any visible means of flight, often draped in heavy, layered garments that look remarkably like modern pressure suits. They wear large, rounded headgear that obscures their faces, creating an appearance that is jarringly out of place for a culture living thousands of years before the invention of the engine. Local legends passed down through generations refer to these beings as great gods from the sky, a title that suggests these were not mere figments of a dream but powerful visitors who once walked and flew among the people. The level of detail in these paintings is what truly puzzles the modern mind, as the artists meticulously captured joints, seals, and proportions that suggest they were documenting a specific physical observation. Researchers of the Neolithic era have no explanation for the sudden emergence of this round head style, which appears in this single region and nowhere else in the global archaeological record. These silent watchers seem to look down upon anyone who stands before them, their postures capturing a sense of calm authority as they drift across the stone. This sense of being observed by visitors from another realm is not unique to the sands of North Africa, as the same beckoning eyes and strange silhouettes reappear halfway across the planet in the isolated Kimberley region of Australia. Deep in the rugged terrain of northern Australia, white silhouettes with massive black eyes stare out from the rock as if waiting for a doorway to reopen. These are the Wandjina, celestial beings who the local Aboriginal people believe descended from the heart of the Milky Way to shape the world and its laws. What makes these figures truly haunting is the complete absence of a mouth on every single portrait. Traditional oral histories explain that these creators are so powerful they have no need for spoken words, for their thoughts alone can manifest reality or bring forth the rains. Encircling their heads are vibrant halos of light and shadow that look like glowing helmets or swirling clouds of energy, giving them an appearance that feels more technological than biological. For thousands of years, the traditional custodians of this land have meticulously repainted these images to keep the connection to their ancestors alive, yet the origin of the design remains a profound mystery. When you stand before a wall of Wandjina, their large, unblinking eyes seem to penetrate the present moment, echoing the descriptions of visitors from the stars found in many modern accounts. These figures were not painted as myths or symbols, but as historical witnesses to a time when the sky and the earth were one. The sheer scale of these murals across such a remote and difficult landscape suggests that these were not the doodles of a single person, but a massive, coordinated effort to document a specific, shared experience with the unknown. This theme of sky-dwelling instructors who lack human features is a thread that spans across the oceans, leading to the jagged cliffs of Spain where even more bizarre entities were etched into stone. Elongated limbs and towering frames dominate the rock faces of eastern Spain, where the Levantine horned giants loom over the landscape. These figures possess proportions that deviate sharply from the human form, stretching toward the ceiling of the caves with an elegance that feels both graceful and unsettling. Most striking are the massive horns protruding from their heads, curved structures that do not resemble the antlers or horns of any animal native to the region during that era. While some researchers suggest these were elaborate costumes worn for ancient ceremonies, the way the artists captured their movement implies something far more mysterious. The giants are often depicted in mid-air or in rhythmic poses that suggest they were performing a ritual that defied the weight of the world, floating just inches above the ground. This consistent portrayal across dozens of scattered sites indicates that these figures were not the result of a single artist's imagination, but rather a reflection of a shared reality that left a permanent mark on the collective memory of the people. If these were mere costumes, the level of uniformity across hundreds of miles and many centuries is almost impossible to explain without a centralized source of inspiration. The horned giants appear as silent governors of the wilderness, standing with an authority that suggests they were either revered or deeply feared by the nomadic groups who painted them. These figures represent a total departure from the natural world, acting as a bridge between the physical and the supernatural that seems to suggest our ancestors were interacting with a presence we can no longer identify. While these towering silhouettes suggest a sense of organized ritual, they lead the mind toward even more confusing discoveries found within the deep chambers of France, where the laws of biology were discarded entirely in favor of impossible hybrids. Deep within the labyrinthine tunnels of a French cavern lies a figure that seems to break every rule of the natural order. This entity is known as the Sorcerer of Trois-Frères, a name that captures only a fraction of its bizarre and unsettling presence. Unlike the simple sketches of bison or deer found nearby, this figure is a precise anatomical puzzle, carefully blending the features of the strongest creatures in the wilderness. It stands on the muscular legs of a human, yet it possesses the powerful paws of a bear and the long, flowing tail of a horse. Crowning its head is a magnificent set of deer antlers, while its face remains hauntingly human, staring out with a pair of large, piercing eyes. For decades, researchers have labeled this as the earliest representation of a shaman or a prehistoric priest wearing a costume. Yet the way the muscles and skin are rendered suggests a seamless biological whole rather than a person in a suit. Each disparate limb is drawn with such accuracy that it looks like a chimera, a living creature made from the parts of many. Some people believe the artist was documenting a legendary ancestor, a being who possessed the combined strength, speed, and wisdom of all predators to act as a guardian of the deep earth. The stare of the sorcerer is what truly lingers in the mind, as those unblinking eyes seem to convey an intelligence that feels uncomfortably modern and self-aware. It does not look like a fragment of a dream, but like an observer who has been waiting in the darkness for thousands of years to see who might wander into its domain. This level of intentional detail forced the early humans of the region to confront a being that was neither fully animal nor fully man, a mystery that echoes across the Atlantic Ocean. This tradition of depicting impossible blends of life takes a different and perhaps even more confusing turn in the rugged canyons of North America. Crimson shadows stretch across the sun-bleached cliffs of the American Southwest, where a towering entity known as the Winged Man of Barrier Canyon remains frozen in a graceful, eternal descent. This figure is unlike anything else found in the region, possessing a long, humanoid torso that tapers into a ghostly point rather than ending in human feet. Its massive wings are not feathered like those of a hawk or an eagle, but instead appear as solid, dark extensions of its body that suggest a heavy and powerful presence. The artists of the Utah Desert used a specific, deep red mineral pigment to create this image, a material so durable that it has resisted thousands of years of wind and intense heat. While many historians categorize these as spiritual visions or the results of ancient rituals, the sheer physical consistency of the figure across multiple sites suggests the witnesses were documenting something they saw with their own eyes. There is a haunting stillness to the painting, as if the being is hovering in a state of perfect balance, watching over the canyon floor with an intelligence that predates the written word. Some observers have noted that the tapering base and wide span of the figure resemble modern descriptions of flight suits or even biological entities that have long since vanished from the natural world. This silent guardian of the sandstone serves as a reminder that the skies of the ancient past may have been occupied by travelers we are only beginning to acknowledge. The isolation of the Utah Desert has preserved these winged silhouettes, yet they represent just one piece of a global puzzle that becomes even more mechanical and structured as we move toward the distant ruins of the Far East. Bronze or iron tools could not have created the intricate geometric precision found along the cliffs of Ningming County in China. Known as the Huashan rock art, these massive murals stretch across towering limestone walls, depicting hundreds of figures gathered in a state of collective awe. They are shown reaching out or bowing toward large, circular objects that defy historical explanation. These are not simple representations of the sun or the moon, which ancient artists typically drew with radiating lines of light. Instead, these objects feature distinct outer rims and complex internal spokes that look remarkably like the structural components of a mechanical wheel or a metallic craft. The artists captured a sense of mass and weight in these objects that suggests they were not light sources in the sky, but physical manifestations present on the earth. To create these images on such a vertical and dangerous scale required a staggering level of social organization and engineering, as the painters had to work at heights that would challenge a modern climber. The uniform repetition of these metallic-looking discs across the entire cliff face points to a specific historical event that was witnessed by a large population rather than a private vision of a single person. Every figure is drawn in a posture of reverence or intense focus, as if the appearance of these spinning wheels changed their understanding of the universe forever. There is no record of any technology in that region or era that could serve as a model for these spokes and rims, leaving us to wonder what stood before these people to inspire such a monumental effort. As we try to reconcile these mechanical wonders with the ancient past, the mystery deepens when we look at the strange shapes of life itself that were being documented halfway across the world. In the remote corners of the Brazilian bush, the rock art takes a turn toward the biological, revealing creatures that seem to exist outside the known laws of evolution. Extraordinary shapes and impossible biology emerge from the red stone walls of Serra da Capivara in the remote Australian interior of Brazil. Travelers who venture into these ancient rock shelters are met with scenes that challenge the very definition of the human form. Unlike the typical stick figures found in other parts of the world, these paintings show beings with a perplexing number of limbs, including extra arms and legs that sprout from their torsos with fluid, natural curves. These are not standing still like statues or idols to be worshipped from afar. Instead, the artists portrayed them as active members of the community, seen running alongside hunters or participating in complex group activities. What makes these figures so unsettling is the anatomical consistency across different shelters, as the extra limbs are always joined to the body at logical points, suggesting the painters were not merely experimenting with abstract art. If these were errors or stylistic choices, we would expect to see more variation, but the precision of the joints and the way the figures interact with their environment points toward a specific observation. Local traditions do not provide a clear name or story for these multi-limbed individuals, creating a silent mystery that stretches back thousands of years. It is as if a specific branch of life was documented on these walls and then completely erased from the physical world, leaving only these crimson silhouettes as proof of their existence. This focus on biological anomalies and beings that stand outside the known laws of nature is not a local quirk established by a single tribe. The same fascination with impossible anatomy and non-human visitors travels across the sea to the deep, humid caves of central India, where the evidence of an ancient encounter becomes even more direct. Glowing orange and black pigments on the cavern walls of Chhattisgarh reveal a species of visitor that looks more like an insect than a man. These figures are known locally as the ant people or the Rohela, and they represent some of the most startling archaeological finds in central India. Each figure is rendered with a large and bulbous head that tapers down into a tiny chin, completely lacking any visible nose or mouth. Their bodies are incredibly thin and spindly with elongated limbs that suggest a fragile but purposeful grace. Unlike the broad and powerful silhouettes found in the Sahara, these beings appear almost delicate, as if they were designed for a different level of gravity. What truly captures the attention of researchers is the equipment these figures carry. In their slender hands, they hold objects that look like specialized tools or weapons, featuring smooth curves and sharp angles that do not match the stone or bone implements used by the local tribes of that era. The artists used specific shading techniques to show these tools as being made of a material that reflects light differently than anything found in nature, hinting at a metallic or polished surface. Local oral traditions speak of the Rohela arriving in round flying boats that descended into the valleys, and the paintings mirror these stories with incredible precision. These are not the messy or hurried sketches of a bored hunter, but are instead careful and deliberate documentations of a physical encounter. The line work is steady, and the proportions are consistent across multiple sites throughout the region. This suggests that the ancient witnesses were not drawing a ghost or a spirit, but were recording a biological reality that remained in their land long enough for the details to be memorized. These insect-like travelers stood in stark contrast to the massive and armored figures seen in other parts of the world, yet they share the same unnerving lack of human facial features. This recurring theme of life that does not follow the human blueprint continues to appear in the most unexpected places, leading us toward the high mountain passes of the Himalayas, where the scale of these visitors changes once again. Thick plates of what looks like metal or hardened leather wrap around the bodies of the giants standing tall in the Ennedi Plateau of Chad. These figures represent a jarring shift from the lithe and graceful hunters found in the surrounding rock art, appearing instead as heavy and imposing figures encased in segmented layers of protection. Each suit is rendered with an incredible level of detail, showing distinct boots that merge into leggings and gloves that seem integrated into the sleeve. Most baffling of all are the helmets, which cover the entire head and feature narrow horizontal slits where the eyes would be. These designs appear in the archaeological record thousands of years before the invention of chainmail or plate armor, leaving historians to wonder what could have possibly served as a model for such a complex outfit. The environment of the Ennedi is a harsh and blistering desert, a place where wearing heavy, multi-layered garments would be a death sentence for a local hunter. Yet the artists went to great lengths to show the overlapping textures and the rigid structure of this gear, suggesting that the protection was intended to shield the wearer from something far more dangerous than the sun. The way the figures stand is also unique, as they often appear stiff and methodical, moving with a weighted purpose that contradicts the fluid life of the nomadic tribes. It is as if the painters were trying to capture a material they had no name for, a substance that was neither skin nor cloth. Some observers have pointed out that these suits look less like armor for battle and more like specialized equipment for surviving a hostile environment or even navigating through water. This focus on heavy, sealed protection creates an image that is both functional and alien, as if these figures were not inhabitants of the desert but visitors prepared for a different world altogether. This recurring image of figures encased in airtight layers suggests a widespread observation of technology that should not have existed, a mystery that takes a literal dive into the unknown in the southern tip of the continent. Deep within the sandstone ridges of the Cederberg Mountains in South Africa, the red and ochre paintings of the Sand People reveal a transition that seems to defy the laws of the natural world. These ancient artists captured figures with the upper bodies of humans but the unmistakable lower bodies of fish or dolphins, showing them gliding effortlessly through the landscape. While stories of merfolk are found in the folklore of later civilizations, these specific depictions are remarkably old and possess a clinical, almost biological precision. The tail fins and scales are not drawn as decorative symbols but are rendered with a clear understanding of marine anatomy that includes joints and functional curves. This level of detail is a profound puzzle because the people who created this art lived in a semi-arid, mountainous region located hundreds of miles away from the nearest coastline. It is difficult to explain how a community with no direct access to the ocean could so accurately document the mechanics of aquatic life. These paintings often show the fish people swimming alongside ordinary land animals like antelopes, blending two entirely different worlds into a single, cohesive scene. Unlike typical myths that separate the sea from the land, these murals suggest a time when such boundaries did not exist or where these hybrids were a physical reality witnessed by the ancestors. The artists seem to be documenting a lost connection to a world we no longer recognize, treating these impossible beings with the same grounded realism they used for the wildlife they hunted every day. This consistency suggests that the San were not drawing fantasies from a dream, but were instead recording a part of their environment that has since vanished. As we consider the possibility of life forms that merge different biological traits, the focus shifts across the globe toward the high deserts of South America. There, the theme of biological impossibility takes on an even more celestial tone through the strange and haunting star-headed figures of Peru. Sharp light bursts from the necks of human-like figures etched into the volcanic stones of Toro Muerto in the Peruvian desert. These are the star-headed travelers, a collection of thousands of carvings where the traditional human face is replaced by radiating patterns and geometric beams of light. Unlike ceremonial masks which usually have ties to known animals or deities, these shapes are drawn as active sources of energy that seem to illuminate the very ground beneath the figure's feet. The artists, through careful use of line and space, captured a sense of glowing intensity that makes it look as if the heads are not made of bone and skin but of pure light. Many of these entities are depicted in a state of levitation, their feet dangled above the earth while they hover over rectangular platforms. These platforms are carved with such straight lines and symmetrical corners that they resemble modern landing pads more than any natural rock formation. The sheer scale and frequency of these images across the desert suggest that these glowing visitors were a frequent and familiar part of the ancient landscape rather than a single mysterious event. If these were simply ancient lanterns or torches, the level of brightness and the way the light is shown to project outward suggests a technology that was supposed to be thousands of years in the future. The people of the Andes seem to have been documenting a physical connection with beings who carried their own light, a concept that challenges the primitive tools we usually associate with that era. This meticulous attention to detail and the recording of observed physical phenomena extends far beyond the desert of Peru. It leads to the high valleys of northern Italy, where ancient people began to carve intricate blueprints of the world that look more like satellite images than simple drawings. Glacial scars across the stone of the Italian Alps reveal a complex web of knowledge that seems to reach across the entire universe. These carvings represent the Valcamonica map of the heavens, a massive and intricate grid of lines and geometric symbols that stretches across a mountain face. To the casual observer, it might look like a series of abstract decorations, but when specialists layered these patterns over a map of the stars, the results were staggering. The dots and connections correspond with incredible accuracy to the night sky, as it would have appeared 10,000 years ago, long before the invention of the lens or the modern study of physics. These prehistoric hunters were not just observing the stars, but were documenting them with a three-dimensional precision that suggests they understood the depth and curvature of the cosmos. Even more confusing is the inclusion of symbols that represent celestial events and objects that are normally invisible to the human eye without the aid of high-powered telescopes. This discovery forces a total reconsideration of what the primitive mind was capable of, as it indicates a mastery of advanced mathematics and long-term observation that matches the work of modern observatories. The people of the Valcamonica Valley were not merely struggling to survive, they were researchers who understood their place in a much larger system. They captured the movement of the planets and the cycles of the sun with a technical clarity that feels out of place in an age of stone and bone tools. This intellectual leap suggests that the knowledge of the past was handed down from a source that possessed a panoramic view of the heavens. This same drive to document the mechanical and the structured appears in the most frozen reaches of the Earth, where the focus shifts from the stars in the sky to the strange and rigid shapes found on the ground. Deep in the shadows of the Ural Mountains, a series of ancient sketches reveals a mechanical secret that seems to belong to a much later century. These are the gear wheels of the Urals, where Stone Age artists traded the imagery of animals and plants for the rigid lines of industrial design. On these cold rock walls, we find intricate drawings of interconnected circles and cogs that look exactly like the internal clockwork of a complex machine. What makes these paintings so disruptive to our understanding of history is their timing, as they were created long before the wheel was even being used for simple carts or pottery. The artists did not just draw circles, they carefully rendered the teeth of wheels meshing together in a way that shows a clear understanding of the transfer of energy and motion. Each spoke and cog is positioned with a mathematical precision that suggests the illustrator was looking at a physical object rather than dreaming up a fantasy. Scientists have struggled to find a logical explanation for what could have served as a real-world model for such technical drawings in an era of flint and wood. The level of mechanical sophistication captured in these lines hints at a hidden layer of history where complex devices were being used or observed by people we once considered primitive. It is as if these mountain dwellers were trying to preserve a blueprint of a technology they did not yet have the tools to build themselves. This jarring appearance of advanced mechanics in a world of hunter-gatherers echoes the confusion felt by researchers when they find accurate depictions of life that should have been long gone. This same sense of an impossible timeline reappears in the isolated caves of the Australian outback, where the rock art features creatures that biology claims were dead tens of thousands of years before the first brushstroke. Vivid stripes and jagged teeth define a predator that history claims vanished into the shadows of the deep past. On the rock walls of Arnhem Land in northern Australia, the traditional owners of the land documented an animal that modern science only knows through the study of ancient fossils. This is the thylacoleo, often called the marsupial lion, a creature that supposedly went extinct roughly 40,000 years ago. What makes these paintings so disruptive to our understanding of the world is the staggering level of biological detail present in every line. The ancient artists did not just draw a generic large cat, they captured the specific, bulky anatomy of a hunter that was unique to Australia. They meticulously rendered the distinctive stripes across its back and the specialized, bolt-cutter teeth that could snap through the strongest materials. These portraits are so anatomically perfect that they serve as a visual record of a living, breathing animal, rather than a reconstructed skeleton in a museum. This creates a massive problem for the current timeline of human history, as it suggests that people were living alongside and carefully observing these beasts long after they were thought to be gone. To paint something with such high fidelity requires more than just a passing glance or a tribal legend. It requires direct and repeated interaction with the subject. The presence of these paintings suggests that the survival of certain species and the arrival of humans in these remote regions happened on a much different schedule than our textbooks allow. These creators were not just artists, they were naturalists who recorded the world exactly as they saw it, even when what they saw was a biological ghost. This ability to capture the likeness of long-lost creatures is a skill that seems to have been shared by early people across the globe. Just as the hunters of the outback were documenting the impossible, the inhabitants of the limestone caves in France were busy recording their own encounters with creatures that should not have been there. Shadowy recesses of the Chauvet cave in France hold a portrait that seems to hum with a strange and ghostly vitality. This is the great woolly rhino, a creature that dominated the frozen plains of the Ice Age, yet the way it is rendered on these stone walls defies every standard of prehistoric art. Most animal sketches of this era use solid lines and flat colors to represent bone and muscle, but the Chauvet artists chose a different and much more difficult path. They used a sophisticated combination of surface scraping and delicate charcoal shading to give the rhinoceros a coat of fur that appears to glow. This technique creates a shimmering, translucent effect that shifts as a torchlight moves across the wall, making the heavy beast look as if it were wrapped in a layer of light or energy. No other animal in the entire cave complex is given this ethereal treatment, which suggests the artist was trying to capture a very specific and unusual visual quality. Some researchers argue that this was a depiction of a spirit animal, a being from a dream world that moved with a different kind of grace than the creature's hunters followed for food. Others propose a more radical idea, suggesting that there may have been a rare and now extinct subspecies of rhinoceros with unique, reflective hair that has never been found in the fossil record. The level of technical skill needed to replicate such a fleeting optical effect is staggering, revealing a mind that was not just hunting for survival, but was deeply tuned into the physics of light and appearance. This prehistoric master was able to bridge the gap between the solid world of the Earth and a mysterious, luminous reality that few others could see. The fascination with beings that carry their own radiance is not limited to the deep caverns of Europe, as the same glowing presence appears etched into the sun-scorched rocks of North America. Gazing out from the sun-scorched cliffs of Utah, the neon specters of Sego Canyon appear as if they are fading in and out of our physical reality. These towering figures are a hallmark of the Barrier Canyon style, yet they possess a haunting quality that sets them apart from any other ancient art in North America. The most striking feature of these beings is their complete lack of arms, replaced instead by long, tapering torsos that seem to float against the rock. The artists utilized a rare technique to give these entities a transparent appearance, allowing the viewer to look through their outer skin. Inside their chests and limbs, the painters meticulously rendered internal structures that resemble glowing skeletons or complex pathways of energy. These are not the solid, opaque bodies we associate with human life, but rather hollow vessels that look like they are composed of light, smoke, or a substance that does not belong to the solid earth. When the sun hits the canyon walls at a specific angle, the vibrant pigments used by the ancient creators seem to shimmer and pulse with life of their own. The specters stand in large, silent groups, their faces defined by massive, hollow eyes that create a sense of intense, unblinking observation. There is no indication of clothing, tools, or weapons, suggesting that the power of these beings came from their very nature rather than anything they carried. This intentional focus on transparency shows that the people of this region were trying to document a phenomenon that was non-physical, or perhaps a form of life that functioned on a different frequency than our own. It required a high level of artistic discipline to paint the internal and external layers of a body simultaneously, pointing to a sophisticated understanding of anatomy and light. The sight of these translucent guardians watching over the desert creates a bridge to other parts of the world where the veil between the seen and the unseen was equally thin. This recurring theme of beings who lack a solid form and reveal their inner workings leads us back to the shifting sands of the Sahara Desert. Faint outlines of the desert horizon shimmer straight through the torsos of the staggering figures found at Tassili and n-Ajjer. These are the transparent giants, a series of ancient paintings where the artist used a dilute wash of pigment to create a ghost-like effect that allows the rock texture and background to remain visible. While the previous specters of the American desert focused on a hollow glow, these North African giants reveal a complex and confusing internal structure that looks nothing like a human skeleton. Long tapering necks support small heads, and their limbs are punctuated by extra joints that would allow for a range of motion unknown to our species. The painters were not merely being sloppy or abstract, as the placement of these internal bones is consistent across several different panels, suggesting they were documenting a specific and very strange biological reality. These phantoms of the prehistoric world are often depicted with their hands outstretched, seemingly tending to herds of animals that could never survive in a parched desert environment. They are shown moving alongside hippos and water-dwelling creatures in a region that has been arid for thousands of years, creating a scene where both the inhabitants and the environment feel like they belong to a different version of Earth. This suggests that the artists were either recording a memory of a lush, lost paradise or witnessing a tear in the fabric of their own reality where impossible things became visible. The giants stand as silent guardians of a world that was both physical and ethereal, a concept that required the ancient mind to develop a visual language for things that were present but perhaps not fully solid. This fascination with beings that exist between two worlds and the appearance of life where it should not survive travels far from the heat of the Sahara into the high, frozen reaches of the north. In the jagged landscape of Scandinavia, the rock art shifts its focus toward entities that seem to have mastered the very elements that should have claimed their lives. Freezing winds scream across the jagged coastline of northern Norway, yet the stones of altar tell a story of sweltering heat and tropical life. Long ago, ancient artists carved images into the rock that belong thousands of miles away in the heart of the African savanna. These are not the reindeer or seals one would expect to find near the Arctic Circle, but the unmistakable long necks of giraffes and the feathered silhouettes of ostriches. These carvings date back to a time when this northern landscape was already gripped by the cold, making the presence of these warm climate animals a complete geographical impossibility. The artists captured the specific gait and distinctive movements of these creatures with such a high level of accuracy that they could not have been drawing from mere rumors or vague folk tales. Every curve of the neck and every angle of the legs suggests the illustrator had seen these animals in person, watching them move across a landscape they should never have occupied. This discovery forces us to consider a past where the world was much more connected than we ever realized, perhaps through a massive prehistoric trade network that stretched across entire continents. It is equally possible that our understanding of global climate shifts is incomplete, hinting at a time when the frozen north might have supported life that we now only associate with the equator. The idea that ancient humans were sharing sketches of impossible animals across such vast distances changes our view of them from isolated survivors to global explorers. These Arctic mysteries suggest that the boundaries of the ancient world were far more fluid than the lines on our modern maps. This same pattern of documenting life from a completely different era or environment appears again deep within the dense rainforests of South America, where the rock art takes an even more prehistoric turn. Vibrant red murals stretch across the jagged cliffs of the Colombian jungle, hiding a secret that timeline experts say should not exist. This is the Serrania de la Caribecuite, a remote mountain range where tens of thousands of individual paintings decorate the stone. Amidst the expected scenes of tribal life and local wildlife, there are startling portraits of creatures with incredibly long, arched necks and thick, heavy tails. These figures possess the unmistakable profile of sauropod dinosaurs, the massive long-necked reptiles that supposedly vanished 66 million years ago. What makes these images so haunting is that they do not appear as static symbols or deities from a distant myth. Instead, the ancient artists portrayed them in active, contemporary scenes, showing them walking alongside groups of hunters or grazing near human settlements. The level of anatomical detail is what truly keeps researchers awake at night, as the paintings capture specific skin textures and realistic physical postures that match our most modern scientific reconstructions. The artists even rendered the way these animals would have distributed their massive weight while standing, a detail that is nearly impossible to guess without seeing a living subject. If these were simply mistakes or exaggerations of known animals like llamas or tapirs, the proportions would be wildly different. These are not distorted sketches, but deliberate records of a species that mainstream science insists humans could never have seen. This suggests a world where a small pocket of prehistoric life might have survived deep within the unreachable green canopy of the Amazon, coexisting with the first people to settle the region. Every brushstroke on these cliffs serves as a challenge to the established order of history, hinting at a past where the age of reptiles and the age of man were not separated by millions of years. This documentation of lost giants is not an isolated event in South America, as a similar mystery involving impossible megafauna appears just across the border in the deep caves of Brazil. Massive shadows cast by creatures the size of elephants flicker across the stone walls of the Brazilian Caatinga. These paintings depict a struggle for survival against a beast that should have been a memory long before the first artist picked up a brush. The animal in question is the Megatherium, a giant ground sloth that possessed curved claws as long as a human arm and a body so dense it could clear entire groves of trees. Modern science tells us these monsters vanished from the face of the earth roughly 10,000 years ago, yet the rock art in northeastern Brazil tells a much more recent story. The hunters shown in these scenes are not tiny figures lost in a landscape. They are participants in a high-stakes confrontation with a creature that towers over them with anatomical accuracy. The painters captured the unique way these heavy mammals sat back on their haunches, using their tails as a third leg for balance while they reached for high branches. What makes this discovery truly impossible is the fresh state of the pigments and the archaeological layers they sit in, which suggest these images were created by cultures living thousands of years after the supposed extinction of the great sloth. It implies that the deep, thorny scrubland of the Caatinga served as a final refuge, a hidden pocket of the world where prehistoric giants continued to walk the earth alongside early human communities. The tension in these hunt scenes is captured through the jagged, energetic lines of the attackers and the overwhelming mass of the prey, reflecting a real-world encounter with a force of nature that refused to die out. This evidence of a surviving prehistory suggests that our ancestors were witnessing the final days of an older world, one where the boundaries between eras were blurred. While these scenes in Brazil are filled with the chaos of the hunt, a very different and more serene kind of mystery was being recorded on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. Low-hanging clouds often drift into the fug-up caves of Hokkaido, Japan, where stone walls preserve a vision of the sky that completely ignores the technology of the ancient world. These drawings depict long and sleek vessels that do not sit in the water, but instead glide through the open air high above the crashing waves of the Pacific. Most traditional maritime art shows the sea touching the hull of a boat, but here, the artists carefully drew a wide gap of empty space between the ocean and the bottom of the craft to show clear flight. These vessels are equipped with strange, wide fans or wing-like structures on their sides, suggesting a method of propulsion that was entirely different from the oars or sails used by the local people. Inside these flying boats, the passengers are shown wearing elaborate attire and tall, pointed headgear that does not match the traditional clothing of the early German culture. Some observers have noted that these figures appear to be operating the crafts with a sense of calm routine, as if traveling between the clouds was a standard way to navigate the rugged coastlines of the north. The fact that these images appear in multiple caves across the region suggests that a large number of people witnessed these aerial displays over a long period. Local legends from the island of Hokkaido frequently mention visitors who traveled on the wind, and these stone carvings serve as a physical record of those stories. The artists were not drawing a decorative pattern, they were capturing a mechanical silhouette that moved with a grace and speed they had never seen before. This fascination with celestial travel and vessels that conquer the horizon appears again thousands of miles away on the cold stones of the North Sea. The strange sun ships carved into the rocks of Scandinavia carry this same theme of light and motion, showing that the dream of leaving the Earth was a global obsession for our ancestors. Gleaming wheels of stone cut through the Swedish landscape at Tanum, where Bronze Age artists documented a technology that bridges the gap between the ocean and the stars. These are the Sun Chariots, depictions of massive vessels that initially appear to be traditional Viking-style ships, but upon closer inspection reveal a shocking mechanical secret. Unlike any sea-going craft of the era, these vessels are mounted on large, perfectly circular wheels and are shown moving across the sky without any visible sails, oars, or animal teams to pull them. The artists went to great lengths to carve complex interlocking circles within the wheels, creating an internal geometry that looks less like a wooden wagon and more like a detailed schematic of a gear system. Some researchers have pointed out that the count and placement of these circles align with the visible planets and their orbits, suggesting that these ancient people possessed a technical understanding of the solar system thousands of years before the invention of the telescope. The lines are executed with such a steady and purposeful hand that it feels as if the carvers were tracing a physical blueprint or a heavy metallic object that had been placed before them. There is a rigid, industrial quality to the Tanum carvings that creates a deep sense of mystery, as if the viewers were trying to make sense of a machine that ignored the laws of friction and gravity. These discs and wheels represent a global fascination with circular, mechanical forms that carry visitors through the sky, a theme that takes on a much more personal and hooded appearance when we look at the strange figures found in the ancient spirit art of Japan. In the deep northern reaches of the islands, we find portraits of beings whose most striking feature is a pair of massive, bulging eyes that look like specialized lenses. Gazing out from the dark alcoves of Aomori, the goggled beings of ancient Japan present a vision of the past that feels strikingly industrial. These figures, which appear both in rock art and as clay forms known as dogu, are defined by massive, bulging eyes that cover nearly the entire face. While some researchers have tried to explain these as traditional snow goggles used to prevent blindness from the winter sun, the paintings themselves tell a much more energetic story. In these illustrations, the oversized eye lenses are often shown glowing with a vibrant intensity, casting long and narrow beams of light that strike the ground or the animals standing nearby. This suggests the artists were not documenting a simple wooden tool, but a source of active and focused power. The suits worn by these figures are equally perplexing, featuring intricate patterns of raised studs and intersecting lines that look remarkably like rows of metal rivets or complex electrical circuits. Every seam and joint is rendered with a mechanical stiffness, creating the impression of a protective shell rather than soft fabric. Many of the Aomori paintings capture these beings in a distinct launching posture, with their knees bent and their bodies angled toward the sky as if preparing for a sudden and powerful ascent. This recurring theme of a controlled departure from the Earth points toward a high level of technical observation that was shared across the northern islands. The rigid and structured feel of these suits suggests a culture that was witnessing the arrival of specialized equipment designed for extreme environments. This focus on heavy and functional technology creates a sharp contrast with the more organic and unsettling mysteries found in the ancient river valleys of the Middle East. While the warriors of Aomori were encased in metal and light, the forgotten galleries of ancient Mesopotamia reveal a much more biological and serpentine transformation. Smooth, leathery skin and hooded eyes replace the expected human features in the ancient galleries of the Near East. These are the Serpent-Headed mothers, a collection of startling figures found in the cradles of early civilization that depict a biological merger between humans and reptiles. These beings are not painted as frightening monsters lurking in the shadows, but are instead shown in positions of extreme domesticity and high social status. One of the most haunting scenes depicts a slender, upright lizard woman sitting calmly and nursing a human-like infant, her long fingers cradling the child with a motherly grace that feels deeply at odds with her cold-blooded appearance. These figures are often rendered wearing intricate jewelry and sitting on ornate, high-backed thrones, suggesting that the ancient people who documented them viewed these entities as a ruling class or even a parent species. The artists used a high degree of anatomical realism, capturing the specific curve of a cobra-like hood and the unblinking, crystalline gaze of a predator. This was not a depiction of a person in a mask, as the slender proportions and the way the neck connects to the skull suggest a seamless and functional biology. Across the region, these reptilian individuals appear as silent governors of the first cities, overseeing the transition from nomadic life to organized society. The calm and authoritative posture of these serpent beings leaves us with a chilling question about who truly stood at the beginning of our history. It is a mystery that suggests our ancestors were not alone as they built the foundations of our world, leading us toward one final and even more mechanical discovery that defies every modern explanation. This brings us to the most jarring and enigmatic figures ever found on a stone wall, the metallic and rigid shapes known as the Cylindrical Men. Metallic light reflects from the surfaces of the most jarring figures ever discovered in the Drakensberg Mountains. These are the Cylindrical Men, a final and deeply unsettling mystery left behind by the Sand People in the most remote corners of southern Africa. Unlike any other human or animal form in the region, these entities are rendered with perfectly straight, vertical lines that form rigid, canister-like bodies. Their heads are not rounded or organic, but are instead depicted as flat-topped cylinders that sit directly upon their metallic torsos. Attached to these heavy, structured frames are thin and wire-like limbs that move with a precision that feels entirely mechanical. For a culture that lived in total harmony with the natural world, the appearance of such geometric and industrial shapes is a profound anomaly that defies explanation. The San used a specific and rare mineral pigment for these figures, giving them a distinct luster that separates them from the flat and matte colors of the hunters and prey surrounding them. Even more baffling is the activity these beings are involved in, as they are often shown standing over other humans or animals in a posture of repair or maintenance. They appear to be adjusting or fixing the biological life around them, using their stick-like fingers to manipulate the bodies of the living with a cold and detached efficiency. This specific behavior suggests that the ancient witnesses were not looking at a god or a spirit, but at a functional and purposeful machine. The existence of the Cylindrical Men serves as a final, silent witness to a history that we have yet to uncover. It leaves us to wonder if the people of the Stone Age were actually living in the shadow of a much older and more advanced age of metal. Standing before these rigid forms, the boundary between the primitive past and a high-tech future collapses, forcing us to rethink everything we thought we knew about the origins of our world. Each stroke of pigment and every chiseled line we have encountered serves as a stubborn defiance of the timeline we once took for granted. We have traveled from the shifting sands of Africa to the dense, unreachable green canopies of the Amazon, uncovering 25 mysterious paintings that refuse to fit into the conventional narrative of human history. These images do not merely suggest a creative spark in the early human mind. They act as a physical window into a version of the past where the impossible was a daily reality. From the haunting silhouettes of skyward travelers and the armored frames of giants to the mechanical gears and long-extinct titans, these galleries tell a story of a world that was much more crowded and complex than our textbooks ever dared to reveal. Our ancestors were not just struggling for survival, they were the ultimate witnesses, recording phenomena that mainstream science claims they could never have seen. We are left to wonder if these portraits are the echoes of shamanic visions, the blueprints of a forgotten high-technology civilization, or perhaps the final records of a time when the world was gripped by different climates and unknown species. These murals remain a powerful testament to the enduring mystery of our collective origins, proving that the further we look into the darkness, the more we find that the light of history is not as certain as we were taught. Even if we never uncover the full truth behind these silent watchers and metallic wheels, their presence ensures that the story of humanity remains a beautiful and terrifying open book. The world holds many more secrets hidden in the shadows of the earth, waiting for the moment they can no longer be ignored. You are invited to look closer at the landscape around you, for the next great discovery might be resting just a few steps away in a cave waiting to be rediscovered. Knowing that the past is a labyrinth of secrets, which of these impossible scenes do you find the most haunting or revolutionary? Thank you for exploring these ancient enigmas with us and sharing in the wonder of a world that continues to surprise us through the eyes of those who came before.